The incident report that reached Foundation Command on August 14th was brief and troubling. Research Station Echo, a remote Antarctic outpost staffed by 3 personnel, had gone silent during what the locals called the Long Night, 6 months of uninterrupted darkness at the bottom of the world. The last transmission, logged at 3:47 hours on July 29th, consisted of 7 words: "Do not send anyone, do not open doors." What follows is a reconstruction based on recovered station logs, audio recordings, and the subsequent containment operation that would give birth to the designation SCP-6643. Dr. Rebecca Chen had been stationed at Echo for 4 months when the blizzard hit. She was the senior researcher, 38 years old, with 15 years of Foundation service, specializing in acoustic anomalies. The isolation suited her. The endless dark suited her even better. She had volunteered for the posting specifically because it promised 6 months away from the political maneuvering of Site-19, 6 months of pure research into the strange electromagnetic phenomena that occasionally emanated from beneath 2 miles of ancient ice. The other 2 members of her team were less enthusiastic about their assignment. Marcus Webb, their communications officer and IT specialist, was 26 and completing his mandatory rotation through remote postings. He spent most of his free time watching downloaded movies and complaining about the food. Then there was Commander Viktor Petrov, former Russian military, now Foundation security personnel, who had been assigned to Echo after an incident at Site 77 that nobody discussed. He was 51, built like a barrel, and spoke maybe 20 words per day. They were not friends. They were colleagues bound by circumstance and Foundation protocol, sharing a prefabricated habitat module roughly the size of a small house, surrounded by an endless plain of ice under a sky that had not seen the sun since April. The blizzard began on July 23rd with little warning. Antarctic weather was notoriously unpredictable, but this storm came with a ferocity that surprised even Petrov, who had spent 3 winters on the ice. Within 6 hours, the wind speeds exceeded 120 miles per hour. Within 12, the snow had buried the station's external doors under 8 feet of drift. The howling was constant, a shrieking wail that penetrated the insulated walls and made normal conversation impossible without raising your voice. Category 5, Marcus announced, checking the meteorological instruments on his 3rd day of the storm. Wind chill is pushing -140 Fahrenheit. External temperature -87. Rebecca nodded, pulling her thermal jacket tighter despite the heaters running at full capacity. The cold was seeping in. She could feel it creeping through the walls, through the floor, settling into her bones with a persistence that no amount of hot coffee could dispel. How long? Weather Service says another week at least, maybe 10 days. Supplies? We're fine for 3 months. It's not the supplies I'm worried about. Rebecca understood. The station had been designed for isolation, but isolation with the possibility of evacuation, of rescue, of seeing the sky. Now they were buried alive under tons of snow and ice, the darkness outside absolute, the wind screaming like something alive and in pain. On the 4th day, the heating system in the eastern module failed. Petrov spent 6 hours in near total darkness with a flashlight and a toolbox, his breath visible in clouds of vapor, before he managed a temporary repair. When he emerged, his lips were blue and he was shaking despite his cold weather gear. "We'll hold," he said simply, accepting the hot soup Rebecca had prepared. "Maybe 1 week, maybe less." That night, Rebecca lay in her bunk, listening to the wind and thinking about the mission brief she had received before deployment. Station Echo was not just a research outpost. It sat directly above what Foundation seismologists believed was an ancient cavity in the bedrock, a space that should not exist according to geological surveys, a void that occasionally emitted sounds that microphones could barely register. Her job was to study those sounds, to determine if they represented an anomaly requiring containment or merely an unusual natural phenomenon. She had recorded 3 events in 4 months. Each time, the sound had been the same, a low-frequency pulse that seemed to come from directly beneath the station, lasting exactly 47 seconds, occurring at irregular intervals. The Foundation's leading theory was that it was some kind of cryogenic acoustic event, ice and rock interacting in ways not yet understood. Rebecca had her own theory. The sounds were not random. They were rhythmic, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. On the 7th day of the blizzard, the radio picked up something unusual. Marcus was monitoring the standard Foundation frequencies when the signal came through. Rebecca was in the laboratory module, reviewing her acoustic data for the 100th time, when she heard him call out, "Dr. Chen, you need to hear this." She found him in the communications room, headphones pressed to his ears, his face pale in the glow of the monitors. Petrov was already there, standing with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Marcus adjusted a dial, and suddenly the room filled with static-laden voice transmission. Through the hiss and pop of interference, Rebecca could make out words. "Echo Station, this is Rescue Team Delta 7, requesting immediate entry. We are outside your western airlock. Repeat, we are outside your western airlock and require immediate shelter. Multiple casualties. Please respond." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. "That's impossible. No one could survive out there. The temperature—" "I know," Marcus interrupted, "but listen." He played it again. The voice was male, young, desperate. In the background, she could hear other voices, screaming, crying. The sound of wind, the sound of something else she could not quite identify. "How long have they been broadcasting?" "I just picked it up 5 minutes ago. I've been trying to respond, but they're not acknowledging. It's like they're on a loop." Petrov moved to the window, though there was nothing to see but darkness and the occasional illumination of blowing snow caught in the station's exterior lights. "No one is there," he said flatly. "We don't know that," Marcus protested. "Maybe it's a Foundation team. Maybe they got caught in the storm trying to reach us." "No team scheduled," Rebecca said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. The Foundation was not always forthcoming with information. It was possible that someone had been dispatched without her knowledge. Possible that they had underestimated the storm's severity. Possible that right now people were dying just meters away while she stood here debating protocol. The transmission came again, identical to the first. "Echo Station, this is Rescue Team Delta 7, requesting immediate entry. We are outside your western airlock. Repeat, we are outside your western airlock and require immediate shelter. Multiple casualties, please respond." "We have to check," Marcus said. "We have to at least look." "The thermal cameras," Petrov said. "Check external feeds." Rebecca had forgotten about the cameras. Station Echo was equipped with multiple sensor arrays, including thermal imaging designed to function in total darkness. If there were people outside, living people generating body heat, the cameras would detect them. Marcus pulled up the feed on his monitor. The western airlock appeared on screen, rendered in false color showing temperature variations. The storm was a chaos of blues and purples, the snow and wind barely registering above ambient. The station itself glowed orange and red, heat bleeding from imperfect insulation. The area immediately outside the airlock was empty. No heat signatures, no living things, nothing but the storm and the deadly cold. "Could be malfunction," Marcus suggested weakly. "All 4 cameras show same," Petrov said. He had pulled up the other angles, north, south, east, west. Nothing. The station was alone. The radio crackled again. "Echo Station, this is Rescue Team Delta 7. Please, God, please, we're freezing. Let us in. We know you're there. We can see your lights, please." The voice had changed. It was more desperate now, more afraid. Rebecca felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. "That's not the same transmission," she said quietly. Marcus rewound and played them side by side. She was right. The first message had been calm, professional, following standard emergency protocol. This new one was raw panic, a man begging for his life. "It's adapting," Rebecca said. "Whatever it is, it's changing its approach." "Whatever it is?" Marcus turned to stare at her. "You think this is what? The anomaly you've been studying? Some kind of sound-based phenomenon? I don't know what it is, but nothing living is outside that door." Petrov moved toward the airlock corridor. "I will check manually. Look through window." "There is no window in the airlock," Rebecca said. "Emergency viewport, 10 centimeters. Reinforced, for visual confirmation in case of camera failure." Rebecca had forgotten about that too. The viewport was designed to be opened from inside, a small panel that could be slid aside to allow direct line of sight. In 4 months, she had never used it. They followed Petrov through the narrow corridor that connected the main habitat to the western airlock. The temperature dropped noticeably as they moved away from the heated core of the station. Their breath misted in the air. The walls here were bare metal, frost forming in intricate patterns wherever insulation gaps allowed the outside cold to penetrate. The airlock itself was a small chamber, maybe 2 meters square, with the heavy external door sealed tight against the storm. On the inner wall, Rebecca could see the viewport Petrov had mentioned, a small panel secured with mechanical latches. The radio transmission followed them, Marcus having brought a portable receiver. "Echo station, we're right outside. Please, Sarah's not breathing anymore. Tom's lost consciousness. It's so cold. Please let us in, please." "Don't open anything," Rebecca said, but Petrov was already working the latches on the viewport. "Just looking," he said. "No danger in looking." The panel slid aside with a metallic scrape, revealing a thick pane of reinforced glass, and beyond it, nothing. Absolute darkness. The exterior lights were on. She knew they were on, but the snow was so thick and the darkness so complete that nothing penetrated more than a few feet. Petrov pressed his face close to the glass, his breath fogging the surface. For a long moment he was silent. Then he stepped back, his expression unchanged, but something different in his eyes. "What?" Marcus demanded. "What did you see?" "Nothing. Exactly nothing." "Then why?" "Because something moved." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean something moved? You just said there was nothing." "The snow. It moved wrong, against the wind." The radio crackled. "We can see you. We can see you looking out at us. Please. We're right here. Why won't you open the door?" Marcus grabbed the receiver. "This is Station Echo. Identify yourself. Provide authentication codes. What is your point of origin?" "Static. Wind." "Then, Echo Station, please. We're dying. Authentication is Bravo November 7742. We were dispatched from McMurdo. Please." "McMurdo is 800 kilometers from here," Rebecca said. "No one travels in this weather." "The codes," Marcus said, his fingers flying over his tablet. "I can verify the codes. If they're legitimate." "It doesn't matter if they're legitimate," Rebecca snapped. "The thermal cameras show nothing. Use your head, Marcus. This is not a rescue team." "Then what is it?" She had no answer. The Foundation had trained her for many scenarios, but this was beyond her experience. An entity that could replicate radio transmissions, that could somehow acquire authentication codes, that could move through a storm that would kill any living thing in minutes. What was she dealing with? Petrov closed the viewport panel and secured the latches. "We return to main habitat. We do not open doors. We wait." "Wait for what?" Marcus asked. "For it to leave, or for us to understand." They retreated from the airlock, sealing the corridor door behind them. The temperature rose as they entered the heated sections, but Rebecca could not shake the cold that had settled into her core. Back in the communications room, the radio continued its transmissions, cycling through different voices now, different pleas. A woman crying for her children, an older man reciting prayer, a young voice, maybe a teenager, screaming that they were freezing, that their fingers had turned black, that they could not feel their legs anymore. "Turn it off," Rebecca ordered. "But if it's real, it's not real. Turn it off." Marcus hesitated, then killed the audio feed. The sudden silence was almost worse than the voices. They could still hear the wind, of course, the ever-present howling that had become the soundtrack to their isolation. But without the radio transmissions, the station felt even more alone. Rebecca returned to her laboratory and pulled up her acoustic monitoring equipment. The sensors extended deep into the ice beneath the station, sensitive enough to detect seismic events hundreds of kilometers away. If something was out there, if something was moving around the station, she might be able to detect it through vibration analysis. The readings were chaotic, filled with noise from the storm. But as she filtered out the higher frequencies, focusing on the deep subsonic range, a pattern emerged, a pulse, rhythmic, familiar. It was the same signature she had recorded 3 times before, the sound from beneath the station. But this time it was not coming from beneath. This time the source appeared to be directly outside the western airlock, and it was continuous, not a 47-second burst, but an ongoing signal that had begun approximately when the radio transmission started. Rebecca felt pieces clicking into place, the acoustic anomaly, the storm, the impossible rescue team. They were connected. They had to be. She pulled up her research notes, scanning through months of observations and theories. The Foundation had sent her here to study a sound. But what if the sound was not the anomaly itself? What if it was a symptom of something else? Something that lived in the deep cold and darkness beneath the ice. Something that was now trying to get inside. Her hands were shaking as she compiled her findings into a report. She needed to contact Foundation Command, needed to request immediate evacuation, or at least guidance from someone with more experience in containment protocols. But the storm had knocked out their satellite uplink 2 days ago. They were truly isolated, cut off not just physically, but informationally, alone with whatever was outside. A scream from the communications room brought her running. She found Marcus backing away from his workstation, his face white with terror. Petrov was already there, weapon drawn, though what he planned to shoot she could not imagine. "The cameras," Marcus stammered. "Look at the cameras." The monitor showed the western airlock, the same thermal feed they had checked earlier, but now there was something there. A heat signature, human-shaped, standing directly in front of the external door. As Rebecca watched, it raised what appeared to be an arm and knocked. The sound echoed through the station, metal on metal, slow and deliberate. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. "The temperature out there, nothing could generate that much heat, nothing biological." "Unless it's not heat," Petrov said quietly. "Unless it's something else." Rebecca understood. The thermal camera detected infrared radiation. Most living things emitted such radiation as a byproduct of metabolism, but there were other sources, chemical reactions, electrical processes, or something the Foundation's science had not yet categorized, something that could mimic the signature of life without being alive at all. The knocking continued, patient, persistent, almost polite. Marcus reached for the radio controls. "Maybe we should." "Don't," Rebecca said sharply. "Don't respond. Don't acknowledge it in any way." "But what if it's really someone? What if the cameras are wrong?" "The cameras are not wrong. Trust me, Marcus. I've been studying this thing for months. It's been down there under the ice, doing whatever it does, and now the storm has given it an opportunity. It's trying to get inside." "Why?" Marcus's voice was almost a whimper. "What does it want?" Rebecca had no answer. The Foundation's understanding of anomalies was built on observation, experimentation, containment. But some things defied understanding. Some things existed outside the normal rules, following logic that human minds could not comprehend. The knocking stopped. The heat signature on the monitor remained motionless for several seconds, then moved. It walked along the exterior of the station, visible first on the western camera, then the northern, circling the habitat in a slow, deliberate patrol. "It's testing us," Petrov said, "looking for weakness. The eastern module," Rebecca said suddenly. "The heating failure. The insulation is compromised. If it can sense heat loss..." They ran. The eastern section of Station Echo housed the backup generators and water reclamation systems, essential but not occupied. Petrov's repair had restored heat to the module, but the insulation damage remained. If something wanted to get inside, that was the vulnerable point. They reached the connecting corridor just as the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red. The backup systems, Rebecca thought. Something had triggered the backup systems. Petrov had his flashlight out, the beam cutting through the crimson gloom. The corridor to the eastern module was ahead, the door sealed but not locked. Standard procedure was to keep internal doors unsealed to allow rapid movement in case of emergency. Standard procedure was about to kill them. The door was opening. Not quickly, not violently, but with slow, mechanical precision, the automatic systems responding to what they interpreted as a legitimate access request. Through the widening gap, Rebecca could see the eastern module beyond, the equipment racks, the generator housing, and standing in the center of the room, a figure. It was human-shaped, roughly. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But the proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the joints bending at angles that should not work. And it was bright, painfully bright in the infrared spectrum, glowing like a furnace in the thermal image that Marcus had pulled up on his portable tablet. The figure took a step toward them, then another. Its movements were jerky, uncertain, like something learning to walk for the first time. Petrov fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash blinding. The figure staggered but did not fall. Petrov fired again and again until the magazine was empty and his ears were ringing and the smell of cordite filled the air. The figure stopped, tilted its head, then spoke in a voice that was Rebecca's own. "Why won't you let us in? We're dying out here. Please, we need help." Rebecca felt her gorge rise. It had her voice. Exactly her voice, down to the slight rasp she got when she was tired. It was using her voice against them. "Close the door," she managed to say. "Override the system. Close it now." Marcus was already working the controls, his fingers shaking so badly he could barely manage the touch screen. The door began to reverse, sliding shut with agonizing slowness. The figure lurched forward, faster now, covering the distance with impossible speed. Petrov stepped between them and the thing, his empty weapon held like a club. "Get back," he said quietly. "Get to main habitat. Seal every door behind you. Victor, go, now." Rebecca grabbed Marcus and pulled him away. They ran through the connecting corridors, slamming doors and engaging emergency locks as they went. Behind them she heard Petrov shouting, heard the sound of impact, heard something that might have been a scream cut suddenly short. They reached the main habitat and sealed the final door. Marcus was sobbing, his whole body shaking. Rebecca forced herself to focus, to think. They had lost the Eastern module. They had probably lost Petrov. They were down to 2 people, trapped in an increasingly small space, with something outside that wanted in and was learning how to bypass their defenses. She pulled up the camera feeds. The Eastern module showed empty, no sign of the figure or Petrov. The external cameras showed multiple heat signatures now, dozens of them, surrounding the station in a loose circle. As she watched, they began to move closer. "What do we do?" Marcus whispered. "Dr. Chen, what do we do?" Rebecca's mind raced through options. They could not run. The storm would kill them in minutes. They could not fight. Bullets had no effect. They could not call for help. The communications were down. They were alone with something that should not exist, something that had been waiting beneath the ice for God knew how long, something that had finally found a way to reach them. The radio crackled to life, though Marcus had not touched the controls. Petrov's voice emerged from the speakers, calm and measured. "Dr. Chen, Marcus, you need to open the doors. It's not what you think. I've seen it. I've understood. It's beautiful. It just wants to share that beauty with you." "That's not him," Marcus said. "That's not Victor." "I know. Echo Station." Rebecca's voice now coming from the radio. "This is Rescue Team Delta 7. We have Commander Petrov. He's badly injured but alive. If you want to see him again, you need to let us in." "It's lying," Rebecca said, more to herself than to Marcus. "It's trying to manipulate us." But what if it was not lying? What if Petrov was out there, injured, dying, and she was condemning him by refusing to act? The Foundation trained its personnel to make hard choices, to prioritize containment over individual lives. But training was different from reality. Reality was Viktor Petrov, who had fixed their heater in the dark and the cold, who had stood between them and the thing in the Eastern module, who might still be alive. She made her decision. "Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to record a message, and you're going to transmit it on all Foundation frequencies. Someone might hear it. Someone might come. You said the uplink was down. The satellite uplink. But we have emergency radio. Short range, but it might reach one of the automated relay stations. It's a chance." She recorded quickly, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "This is Dr. Rebecca Chen, senior researcher at Station Echo. We are experiencing a containment breach of unknown origin. An entity capable of mimicry and thermal manipulation has compromised station security. Do not send rescue teams. Repeat, do not send rescue teams. Recommend immediate classification as Keter-class threat and deployment of specialized containment unit. Current personnel status, 2 survivors, 1 missing presumed compromised. We will attempt to maintain containment until support arrives." Marcus sent the transmission on a loop, broadcasting into the storm, into the darkness, hoping against hope that someone would hear. The voices on the radio had multiplied. Now there were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all talking over each other, some pleading, some threatening, some simply screaming. The sound was maddening. a cacophony that made it impossible to think. Rebecca killed the audio and stared at the monitors. The heat signatures had reached the station walls. As she watched, they began to press against the structure, not violently, but with steady, inexorable pressure. She could hear the metal groaning, could feel the vibration through the floor. "The station won't hold," she said quietly. "It was designed to withstand weather, not this." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Hours, maybe less." They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of their sanctuary slowly failing around them. The temperature was dropping. She could see it on the environmental monitors. The heaters were running at maximum capacity, but the cold was seeping in, finding every crack, every flaw, every weakness. Rebecca thought about the sound beneath the ice, the pulse she had recorded and analyzed and tried to understand. She thought about the mission brief that had brought her here, the Foundation's careful classification of an acoustic anomaly that needed study. How wrong they had been. How catastrophically wrong. This was not an acoustic phenomenon. It was something alive, or something that had once been alive, or something that existed in a state between those definitions. It lived in the cold and the dark, in places where human beings could not survive, and it had learned over months of listening to the sounds from Station Echo to mimic what it heard. It had learned to sound human, but it was not human, and if they let it inside, if they gave it access to their warm habitat and their living bodies, it would learn so much more. The external cameras showed the heat signatures merging, flowing together like liquid, forming a single massive presence that engulfed the entire station. The groaning of metal became a shriek. Warning alarms began to sound. "The hull is breaching," Marcus said, his voice empty of emotion. He had moved past fear into a kind of numb acceptance. "Eastern module showing pressure loss. It's coming through." Rebecca made one final decision. She moved to the laboratory module and activated the acoustic equipment, setting it to transmit rather than receive. She cranked the power to maximum and targeted the frequency of the pulse she had recorded, the heartbeat sound from beneath the ice. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Fighting back," she said. "If it communicates through sound, if that's how it thinks or feels, or whatever it does, maybe we can hurt it, or confuse it, or at least make it stop for a moment." She activated the transmission. The speakers throughout the station began to emit a sound below the range of human hearing, a subsonic pulse that she felt more than heard, a pressure wave that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. The effect was immediate. The heat signatures on the monitors recoiled, pulling back from the station walls, fragmenting into individual shapes again. The groaning of metal stopped. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the ever-present wind. Then the radio spoke with a voice that was not trying to sound human anymore, a voice that was like ice grinding against ice, like the deep cold of space given sound. "Stop." Rebecca increased the power. "You are hurting us. Stop. We only wanted to understand. We have been alone so long. We heard your sounds. We wanted to speak, to touch, to know warmth." "You're killing us," Rebecca said, knowing it probably could not hear her, but needing to say it anyway. "You're destroying everything you touch. We do not understand death. We do not understand warm things that stop. We are trying to learn. Please, let us learn." Marcus was staring at her. "Dr. Chen, I think it's telling the truth. I think it doesn't know what it's doing." "It doesn't matter," Rebecca said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. The Foundation's mission was to secure, contain, protect. But protect whom? Protect from what? If this entity was not malicious, if it was simply trying to communicate in the only way it knew how, were they not obligated to find another solution? The acoustic equipment began to overheat, warning lights flashing on the control panel. She could not maintain this transmission much longer. Soon, she would have to make a choice. Shut down and hope the entity would leave them alone, or burn out the equipment entirely in one final burst that might drive it away permanently. Before she could decide, the external door to the western airlock opened, not forced, not breached. Opened properly, the mechanical locks disengaging in sequence, the seal breaking with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Someone had used the external access panel, had entered the correct codes, had followed proper procedure. Petrov walked through the airlock into the station. He looked wrong. His movements were too smooth, too fluid, his face expressionless. When he spoke, his voice had that same grinding quality as the radio transmission. "Dr. Chen, Marcus Webb, please deactivate the acoustic weapon. It is causing damage. We will negotiate." "Victor?" Marcus's voice was small, hopeful. "Commander Petrov is here," the thing wearing Petrov's body said. "We have learned much from him. He showed us how to operate your systems, how to open your doors. He was very helpful before he stopped." Rebecca felt tears on her face. She had known, intellectually, that Petrov was probably dead, but seeing the confirmation, seeing something else puppeting his corpse, was almost more than she could bear. "What do you want?" she asked. The Petrov thing tilted its head. "To understand, to learn, to experience warmth. We have been in the cold dark for so long, longer than your species has existed. We felt the sun once. We remember. We want to feel it again." "You can't," Rebecca said. "You're not built for warmth. You exist in the cold. If you come into our world, you'll die. Or we will. Or both. Then we will learn to adapt, as you have adapted to many things. We are patient. We have time." Marcus was backing away, his eyes wide. "There are more coming," he said, pointing at the monitors. "Dr. Chen, there are more of them coming through the airlock." She saw them on the screens, figures that looked almost human, walking through the open door, spreading through the corridors they had sealed. The station was compromised. In minutes, perhaps seconds, those things would reach the main habitat. Rebecca made her final decision. She overrode the safety protocols on the acoustic equipment and pushed the power beyond maximum, into the red zone where the components would fail. The subsonic pulse became a scream, a weapon, directed at the figures advancing through the station. They fell. Not dead, perhaps not capable of death in any way she understood, but incapacitated, their forms losing coherence, becoming patches of heat and cold, matter without organization. The Petrov thing fell too, collapsing in the corridor, the body finally still. The equipment died with a shower of sparks and the smell of burning insulation. Rebecca felt blood running from her nose, her ears. The pulse had affected her too, though less severely. Marcus was unconscious on the floor, breathing but unresponsive. She staggered to the communications panel and sent one final transmission. "Station Echo to any Foundation assets. Containment has failed. Entity is neutralized, but station is compromised. Recommend site be abandoned and sealed. Do not attempt recovery. Repeat, do not attempt recovery. SCP classification recommended. Designate as Keter class. Extreme cold-based entity capable of mimicry and infiltration. Vulnerable to specific acoustic frequencies, data attached. Dr. Rebecca Chen, signing off." Then she went to seal the external door, to trap the remaining entities inside the station, to ensure that when the storm ended and Foundation teams eventually arrived, they would find a containment scenario rather than an outbreak. She managed to close and lock the western airlock. She managed to activate the emergency beacon that would guide rescuers to the site. She managed to drag Marcus into the cold storage locker, the one place in the station that might protect them from the entities if they recovered, a place so cold that even creatures of ice might not follow. Then she waited in the darkness, listening to the wind, listening for sounds that might be rescue or might be something else, holding Marcus's unconscious body and trying to keep him warm with her own fading heat. The Foundation rescue team found them 6 days later, after the storm had passed and the sun had finally begun its slow return to the Antarctic sky. Rebecca was barely alive, hypothermic and delirious. Marcus had not survived. The station was classified as SCP-6643 and sealed under 20 feet of reinforced concrete. The entities within were contained but not destroyed, existing in a state that Foundation scientists described as dormant but aware. Periodic acoustic pulses were established to maintain the containment, transmitted through the ice at specific frequencies. Dr. Rebecca Chen spent 3 months in Foundation medical care, recovering physically, if not mentally, from her ordeal. Her report became the basis for SCP-6643's containment procedures. She never returned to Antarctica. Sometimes late at night, she still hears the wind howling. She still hears voices on the radio begging to be let in. She knows they are not real. She knows it is only memory, only trauma, only the mind's way of processing the unprocessable. But sometimes, just sometimes, she wonders if the entities in the ice are still learning, still adapting, still waiting for another chance to understand the warmth they remember from before the world grew cold and dark. And she wonders what they will become after enough time has passed, after enough listening and learning. She wonders if humanity will recognize them when they finally emerge, or if they will sound exactly like rescue teams standing outside locked doors, begging to be saved from the storm. The Foundation's official file on SCP-6643 remains classified at Level 4. The site is monitored remotely, the acoustic containment maintained by automated systems. No personnel are stationed within 500 kilometers. The long night continues at the bottom of the world, and in the darkness beneath the ice, something waits and listens and learns. The permafrost keeps its secrets. But sometimes, on frequencies that should be silent, transmissions are detected from the sealed station. Always the same message, repeated endlessly into the void. Echo station to any Foundation assets. Please respond. We are still here. We are so cold. Please let us in.